am going live today to talk to you all about some scary travel mistakes and how to avoid them. I thought it would be good for spooky season with Halloween coming up. Some of these stories that I'm going to share with you are things that I've seen on Facebook. I've heard like at conferences when I'm with other travel agents. I've seen them like posted on Instagram or whatever. We've kind of all seen those. And then I also have some client experiences or some people that I know. And then I also have some personal experiences that I want to share. A lot of these are from when we kind of started out traveling more, and you just learn by making mistakes. So I thought I would share some of our own heartache, and scary travel mistakes that we've done. So a couple of these are going to be kind of like short and punchy, but I'm going to try to give a couple tips to just so you don't make these same mistakes when you travel. And if you are my client, my hope is that we will definitely not make these mistakes because, they've already been made. We don't need to make them again. Okay, so first I kind of want to, obviously say like always, if you have any questions or comments or anything like that and you want to drop them below, maybe you have a scary travel mistake that you want to share or you've had a similar experience to, something that I mentioned today, feel free to drop it in the comments. So the first one that I wanted to talk about was, the concept of the wrong airport. So I think we've seen this internet myth of people flying to Australia instead of Austria and vice versa. I don't know if that's real or not, but I did see a story about a guy who had flown into London. There's two airports in London, just like in Paris, there's two airports. Milan has two airports. Other big cities have two. But this poor traveler did not know that there was two London airports. He kind of assumed that the London airports were kind of like basically in one large place, he said. But London Gatwick and London Heathrow are very far apart. So poor guy landed at Gatwick, had a connection at Heathrow, definitely did not make that connection because he had to leave the airport. They're not close together. So definitely be careful of that. I know a lot of people sometimes do that with New York as well, with going between the airports there in New York. I have done that trek before. It's treacherous with the taxi and traffic, so don't risk that one for sure. So always make sure you're checking the actual airport code. Look for that, not just the city that you're flying into. Make sure you show up at the right spot because some airports are not close to one another. Another one that I saw, I think I saw this one on Instagram maybe. This couple, they were on their honeymoon and they were going to Vietnam, and they had not gotten the correct visas for their travel. So sometimes, you have to have like certain passport regulations, like 6 months on your passport. Sometimes you have to have special visas to get into certain destinations. And this particular couple had flown all the way to Vietnam, which is not a short flight. They showed up, realized they did not have the correct visas. Thankfully, the government there was gracious enough to allow them to purchase it at a hefty price. It was like $2,000 that they charged them for these visas. And then, that could have all been avoided if they would have checked ahead of time. So quick little tip here, if you don't already, definitely use the Sherpa site. It's SHERPA, Sherpa. So if you just Google Sherpa Travel, you can find this site. It's fantastic. You can say what kind of passport you hold, what your travel dates are, where you're headed, and it's going to tell you, it's going to source the information from legitimate government websites, exactly what you need in order to enter the country, because it might be different depending on what kind of passport you hold, or when you're traveling there. So definitely don't get denied. I guess that couple was lucky. They could have just gotten sent back if they didn't have the correct visas. So you don't want to have to fly to a destination and then end up, having to go back home, turn right back around. But another quick little story with a tip, and this one is really like a conglomeration of stories. Over the years, I've had plenty of clients get injured while traveling. Minor injuries for the most part. Those cobblestones in Europe are ruthless. So if you've ever, been traveling on a tour and done a lot of walking on the cobblestone, but I have had some clients in the past where they've had some minor injuries. Maybe they've fallen on some cobblestone, scraped up their face, broke their glasses, maybe even get hospitalized for like a broken collarbone or broken wrist or sprained ankle or something like that. So obviously those are kind of like those travel nightmares that we just all hope and pray that we don't encounter. But, if you combine those with not purchasing, insurance, then that's like a huge regret. You're definitely not going to, make the situation better if you did not purchase insurance. So, we can't really, foresee those injuries that might come up and might happen, but you can definitely purchase insurance ahead of time. Keep in mind, most people's medical insurance that you have in the US does not cover you outside of the US. So at minimum, you definitely want to make sure you have medical insurance when you travel. If you're going somewhere remote, make sure that you have medical insurance that also includes repatriation if you were to get some sort of injury and they need to bring you back into the States in order to, kind of life flight you out of there. So all those kind of scary situations, but insurance is well worth it, especially a medical only policy. They're so cheap. I promise you, let me know. I do sell insurance. Even if I don't sell your trip, I can sell you the insurance. So definitely reach out about that. So another little thing that happened to one of my clients, I felt so bad this happened, and I've really tried to avoid this moving forward. But I had a couple, they got to the airport, we had planned like a little beach getaway to Aruba. It was like cold outside. It was like February or something. And so they were going to get a warm getaway. They show up at the airport. Everything was perfect. Everything was great. He goes to pull out his passport to check in, and TSA denies him. His passport is expired. It was expired by, I don't know, 6 months, a year or something like that. I remember getting a text, Allie, we're headed back home. My passport was expired. We're not going on our trip. So he had forgotten to check. I had asked for the details on his passport, assuming that he had checked the expiration date. He had not. So I don't make that assumption anymore. I oftentimes will ask my clients for pictures of their passports and to double check those expiration dates. But they did not have a vacation to attend. I remember sending them like a little goodie basket because I felt so bad that they were not getting to enjoy Aruba. So don't make that same mistake. Remember, a lot of destinations do require that 6-month validity even on your passport, beyond your travel dates even. So go to that Sherpa site. It's super helpful, and it will help you kind of figure out what you need for your trip. And don't have an expired passport. Check that thing regularly, especially if you have kids. They only last for 5 years with kids, okay? All right. So another little story, and then I'll kind of get into a few more of like my personal ones. So this is something that's kind of tricky. We book travel day in and day out. We're looking at the refund policies, what's refundable, what's non-refundable. But I would say for like the average traveler, they're probably not thinking about that too much. So I was following this girl on Instagram. I think she's like a travel influencer or something. And she had booked an Airbnb in Tokyo. She like found the perfect spot, and she booked it, and she hadn't booked her flights yet. And so she went to go book her flights. Her flight prices doubled, which we've all had that happen. We know flight prices are kind of finicky. They go crazy. She couldn't afford the trip anymore. She was like, crap, I can't do this. So she went back to the Airbnb, and they were like, nope, this is non-refundable. We're not giving you a refund. It doesn't matter. So she was just kind of out the money. And I remember her saying like, never again. I'm always going to book my flights first, And I would say that's honestly probably not a bad idea. Flights can be at least changed for the most part. A lot of them can be adjusted with dates. You can get flight credits back if you need to cancel or make changes. And also, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but when you book flights down at the bottom, pretty much for every major carrier, it's a 24-hour risk-free commitment. So if you make a change, if you realize this isn't going to work with accommodations or whatever, you have 24 hours and you can just cancel your trip for free. Doesn't matter if it was refundable or not. So, that's kind of a little trick there too, to just keep in mind that you always have a 24-hour window with air. So don't get caught in that situation with something non-refundable for sure. And then this is kind of another one that I think is kind of tricky. It's happened to some of my clients. I have to just be super conscious of it when I'm planning trips for people. But I saw this on Twitter. There was a girl, she just was traveling by herself, and she kind of planned this whole week around going to Paris. And, it was in the summertime, and she was going to go to the Louvre and all that. And she was there, her day that she had kind of planned for that was Bastille Day, which is a French holiday. Not a holiday that we celebrate in the States or always think about when we're planning our vacations. And, she planned her trip around something she couldn't even see because the Louvre was closed on that day. So, just remember that many countries around the world celebrate different holidays than the US, and sometimes ones we wouldn't even think about. I got an email this morning for a client's trip in the spring for Italy. I'm always thinking about Easter, but I was not thinking about another holiday that they celebrate in April, and it's kind of like Bastille Day in Italy. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that. So just keep that in mind when you're planning trips internationally. There might be an unknown holiday, so always do your research on the front end. I try to do that with my clients. I always try to research events going on, major things that might disrupt their trip, so we can avoid that. So the next one is definitely one that is a me and Josh story, and is kind of the impetus as to why I consider myself the carry-on queen, and I never check a bag. I always take a carry-on, and I really do stem it back to this story. So on mine and Josh's very first trip to Italy together, we got invited to kind of be chaperones on a WKU trip. So we were, just newbies, and we were just excited. We decided, we'll check a bag, each of us. I think we maybe had like a little backpack or something each. But we just packed our bag. We weren't even thinking or talking to each other. We put all our toiletries and medicine and underwear and all of that in our own checked bag. So each of us had our own checked bag. We checked it. We just had little backpacks with like stuff for the flight. We didn't even think to put like, I don't know, toiletries or underwear or change of clothes or anything like that in our backpack. We didn't swap clothes, in each other's checked bags like you should do if you're going to check a bag. We didn't do any of that. We were newbies. So we end up leaving Nashville. Our flight's super delayed. We land in Philly, miss our connection. Because we checked our bags, they would not let us pick them up at the airport. They're like, no, they're here now. Like, we're just going to hold them till your flight tomorrow. So we were in an overnight flight delay in Philly, and we had no luggage, nothing, no toiletries. We were given like a little toiletry bag and the hotel, with like a little mini like toothbrush or whatever. And we literally slept in our clothes, got up the next day, put on those same clothes, spent the whole day in Philly waiting for the night flight. We went and saw the Liberty Bell, I think, in these day-old clothes. Take our whole flight to Italy, which is a whole day, whole overnight thing, sleeping in the same clothes again. Arrive in Italy, and because we'd missed a day, they were trying to catch us up, so we just were hitting the ground running. No time to change clothes, no time to do anything, no time to go to a hotel. And I just remember, so this is like 72 hours at this point that I'm wearing the same outfit, and it's my travel outfit. Like, it's not cute, I'm wearing my glasses or whatever. My hair is like up in a messy bun. And I remember us touring the Uffizi Gallery in Florence that day, and we had gotten to kind of go to a wing where we could look out over the Arno River and see the Ponte Vecchio Bridge. It was like the most magical moment. I'm literally sitting there crying, thinking, I'm in such a beautiful place and I just stink. I'm just gross. And never again will I travel without a carry-on and all the carry-on essentials with me. So yeah, that's kind of the impetus as to why I only pack in a carry-on, was that right there, that moment. But seriously, that is such lost luggage. Ugh, it's the worst, and it's something that a lot of us face. It's definitely, I think the easiest way to fix it is to pack in a carry-on, but if you're going to travel with someone else, definitely swap out some essentials, pack a pair of underwear in your backpack, all that good stuff. So another crazy luggage story that happened to one of my clients, he was going golfing. I'm pretty sure he was going to the DR, and he was going to be golfing a bunch that week while he was there. So he wanted to take his clubs. So he checked his golf bag, got to the DR. His golf bag was not there. His golf bag was in California with all his clubs. So he tracked it. They tried to get it to him. It never made it to him. I think it was like 9 days later, it finally showed back up in Nashville. So, yeah. It was kind of a nightmare when your luggage goes one way and you go somewhere else. You're going to be constantly chasing it. So, another one that happened to a group, is, whenever you have to do like a double connection with a flight, I always try to avoid those when possible, but sometimes we have to do them. So double connections, they're just super tough. They're super risky. It doesn't matter how much time you put in there. Sometimes they're just not enough time. So I had a group going into Florence. They were doing a double connection, and their connection was in Frankfurt. Frankfurt's a huge airport, tons of traffic. It's very German, so lots of lines and lots of rules, and, people having to walk long distances. And the group leader was really trying to hustle the group along. And she waited and waited and waited. And finally they're like, girl, we got to shut the door. We can't wait anymore for the rest of your group. So the rest of the group joined a little bit later out of Frankfurt to Florence with everybody else. They did not make the double connection. So watch that. Definitely avoid the double connection when you can. If you can just do a one stop somewhere, that's definitely preferred. And just always make sure you have that 2 to 3 hour layover minimum, especially when you're returning back into the US. You're going to have to recheck your luggage. You're going to have to go back through security. Even if you have global entry TSA pre-check, you still have to do those things. So it can take time. Just give yourself that cushion. I hate spending time in the airport. If anybody knows me, they know that I love to get at the airport last minute because I don't want to be there very long, but definitely give yourself that layover minimum, especially coming back on the return. This one is very scary, actually, and I've heard this multiple times. I know I heard this from a friend at a conference recently. She had gotten into a cab, what she thought was a cab in Prague. She'd gone over there, was getting there early, so she wasn't with a bunch of other people. And instead of doing a transfer, she thought, I'll just grab a cab. It'll be fine. Well, she thought she got into a cab, and she didn't. It was unmarked. The driver immediately locked the doors, demanded cash from her. It was like 150 euros to release her bags, which he had in his trunk. And obviously, she was super shaken up, very scary. She paid it, she had the cash on her. She was like, whatever, here, crazy person, and he let her out, and she still didn't have a transfer. It was terrible. But my rule of thumb with this is always private transfers. For all my clients, this is pretty much a non-negotiable. When you land at an airport, you're going to have someone there waiting for you, especially if you're flying somewhere and you've had, a long day of travel, you're tired, you're cranky, you're groggy. You don't want to have to try to figure out how to get somewhere, especially if you're in a foreign country. So private transfer, they hold up a little sign, they have your name on it, they're there waiting for you. It's a friendly face, it's prepaid, and you don't have to worry about getting scammed by a fake taxi, which is definitely a thing. So another story of a client of mine, she actually came to me wanting to plan a trip for her because she had done her first trip on her own to Italy, and she came to me the second time because of this travel mistake that she made. She had gone to, it's funny how a lot of these are relating back to Florence, but she had gone to Florence, and she had rented a car in Florence, which is definitely a big no-no. You do not want to do that. And she wasn't really paying attention. She was driving around, and they have these restricted zones really in a lot of European countries. They're trying to limit the traffic in certain areas to make it walkable for people. Florence 100% has this. There's a lot of areas that are restricted. You cannot drive. They're called ZTL zones. And so this client of mine, she had rented a car in Florence, driven around like it was no big deal, wasn't paying attention to the signs, wasn't paying attention to the restricted zones. I think like a few months later, she got in the mail all these different traffic fines. It was like over $1,000 in traffic fines that she had to pay. So definitely be careful renting cars in foreign countries and where you're allowed to drive. I always advise my clients when it's smart to do that, to do car rentals, and when not to do car rentals. So after that, she was like, I think I'm going to use you from now on because I don't want to make a mistake like that again. It was very costly. Wild. But okay, I think the next few are pretty much either things that, have happened to my clients or to Josh and I, adjacent travelers with us. So when Josh and I very first started leading groups, we were taking like high school kids, and it was recommended to us that these students bring these like travel credit cards. They were almost like bank cards, and they only had a limited amount of money on them, and they could use them, if their parents wanted to give them $400 in spending money or something, then they had that. They didn't have to worry about having their parents' credit card, whatever, carrying cash. So this was recommended to us. We had never done it before, but we were like, well, let's try it. So the couple kids did it. And when we very first landed, we go to the first restaurant. The cards get flagged and they get shut down. They're locked up. We can't use them. This is the only money the kids have. It definitely ended up backfiring on us. Luckily, they were traveling with us and we had our ATM card with us and we could, use our credit cards and get out cash for them. It all ended up working out in the end. But definitely follow, I call it the rule of three. You want to make sure that you have local currency in cash wherever you're going. You want to have a credit card that you've notified. A lot of the credit cards now auto notify, but I always just double check to make sure. And then taking some sort of like debit card, ATM card, you can use that in an ATM and get out more local currency at that day's exchange rate if needed. So that's kind of a little hack that we do. Then you don't have to carry around as much cash with you. Rule of three, definitely make sure you do that because that was a bit of a nightmare when those cards got frozen while we were abroad. Not fun. Another time that I took a group, we had just landed in Paris, literally first day. We're riding the bus into the city. And, we'd gone from the airport to the city. So like we're just landed. And I had a woman who had gotten off the bus. We're walking to the hotel and she reaches down and she doesn't have her passport. So she knew she had it on the bus. So we retraced our steps, called the bus driver, couldn't find it. Thank goodness I had a copy of everyone's passport in my little binder as the group leader. But again, you're not always going to have someone like me traveling with you. So, relatively, it was easy because I had that copy for her to go to the embassy and get a temporary passport, but definitely not a way you want to spend your trip. And if you don't have a copy of your passport on you, that makes it a lot more challenging and time consuming to go to the embassy and get a replacement. So possible to replace a passport abroad, not so fun whenever you are in the moment for sure. This is kind of another thing that happened to a family that's kind of crazy. So over a spring break, this whole family, they were ready to go together to Mexico. They were all traveling together. They took their initial flight to Miami and make their connection to Cancun. And grandma goes to board the flight from Miami to Cancun. They always say, show your passport as you're boarding. She doesn't have a passport. She has a passport card, not a passport book. So, grandma did not get to go to Mexico. She had to stay behind in Miami. Not a fun situation to try to figure out for them. And you definitely have to have a passport book if you are wanting to fly international. A passport card, I don't want to say it's useless, but it's kind of useless. So, it essentially acts like a real ID. So, I mean, you can use them, I think, on cruises, but you cannot use them for international air. If it were me, just don't even get one. Don't confuse yourself. Just get a passport book and you're all set to go. So yeah, that was kind of crazy. And that also is super similar to a colleague of mine, another agent friend. She was supposed to be going on a cruise. And most of the time, when you're going on a Caribbean cruise or something like that, you're flying domestic. So this was post Real ID. She took her Real ID, flew to Miami. Everything was great. Realized, crap, I don't have my passport, which I need to get on a cruise ship. A Real ID is not sufficient enough. You either have to have a passport or you have to have a birth certificate. So needless to say, that was a really stressful situation for her. Thank goodness she arrived a day early. Her husband was able to overnight her birth certificate to the closest FedEx to the port, and it made for a stressful day for sure, but make sure you have the correct ID for your correct travel. Always double check that, make sure. Another thing, this is the last story. This is probably our worst, mine and Josh's worst travel mistake that we made, and just like how it kind of spun out. So we had gone on a trip. This was pretty, again, early in our international travels. And we were being super cheap, which I know people have done this before. I don't do this for my clients. Definitely don't recommend after this. But we booked mixed air carriers. We booked like a little cheapy flight from Frankfurt to Amsterdam. And then we were going to connect for our major flight with like United or something. So we had mixed carriers. It wasn't a connected ticket, all together. And we started getting a little nervous. This was going to be at the end of our trip, thinking, oh gosh, if we have any sort of delay in Amsterdam, we're going to miss our flight. We don't have insurance on that flight. We're going to have to buy a whole nother flight. It was just like spiraling. You get that like travel anxiety. So we decided, you know what? It's not a bad drive. Let's just go rent a car and we will drive it. So we won't worry about the flight. So we go pick up a car, which was kind of an ordeal in itself, because we didn't have an international driver's license, which you should definitely have when you're renting a car in Europe or really anywhere. We didn't have one of those. So we rent this car finally, the guy lets us, and we drive through the night to Amsterdam. So we're driving on the Autobahn, okay? Crazy experience, allowing you to drive pretty much at any speed, right? Down the Autobahn. We end up in Amsterdam. We make our flight on time. It ends up all working out fine. Kind of a crazy story. So we get home a few months later. Josh checks the mail, and in the mail, he has a speeding ticket from Germany. It was all in German. We had to translate it. It wasn't a scam. They had a picture of him driving in the middle of the night on the Autobahn. Apparently, there was construction that we could not read in German, and construction on the Autobahn. So they actually had some speed limits that we were supposed to be following and we were not. So we were charged quite a bit of money by the Germans. And if, again, the Germans, they need to, they like to follow their rules. So yeah, we paid the fee because we want to go back to Germany. So we definitely paid that speeding ticket. So that was one of those where it kind of spiraled out of control. Sometimes one mistake can lead to another. And that definitely was the case for us there. So that's probably one of our wilder travel stories. For the most part, we're pretty good. We follow the rules in planning and booking and things like that. But wanted to hit a few planning, booking mistakes, scary travel mistakes that either I've heard about, my own clients unfortunately have experienced, not too many though, or a lot of them being myself in my early days of travel. I hope that you learned something today. You got a few quick little tips, or maybe got a laugh out of some of the things that we have run into in the past. So the thing is with travel, you can't always predict what's going to happen, but you can definitely alleviate some of the mistakes. So if you'd rather not worry about those mistakes, definitely schedule a consult call with me. I'm more than happy to help you plan your next trip, and we can definitely avoid many, many, many travel mistakes that can be made by the average consumer. So I hope y'all learned something today, and I hope y'all have an awesome Halloween. Thanks.